DevOps Meetup. Today we're talking about complexity. We're talking about the technical side of complexity. We're talking about microservices. We're also talking about how organizations become more complex as they grow. I looked today. We are the 15th largest DevOps group in the world. We have 7.
Woo! Hey guys, it's all you, man.
You think it's 15th, but last year at this time we were 96th. So, wow. Proud of you. We have some upcoming events. So we have Container Summit, which is not a conference, it's more of a meetup. It's free to attend. It's on May 17th if you want to talk about containers. Boston DevOps Days is August 25th and 26th. And tickets and call for proposals, call for talks are open. So if you'd like to attend, yes.
Does everybody know what DevOps Days is? Like, show of hands. You guys familiar with it?
Day of DevOps?
No. What's that?
Day of DevOps?
It's 2 days of DevOps, actually. So the whole conference, it was a non-conference conference for tech, organized by volunteers in tech. And the idea is to get a bunch of engineers together, collaborating on different challenges that they're facing at each of their organizations, and being open and transparent about, like, you know, some of the technical issues, some of the cultural management type challenges that they're facing, and whether other people are facing the same things. So it gives you an open forum to kind of, you know, be honest about, hey, look, we're running into problems here. Has anybody else experienced this? It's a great event for basically, you know, coming up with solutions instead of going down the rabbit hole, right? You start to talk to your fellow coworker, man. It's easy to not see outside of your four walls. This gives you the opportunity to hear from others, knowing that you're part of a bigger community, a bigger practice. Highly suggest anyone who hasn't seen it, check it out. DevOpsDays.org. Gives some history on it. DevOpsDays.Boston.org. You can see what we're doing. We're looking for CFPs, any kind of, you know, proposals that you guys may have, any talks that you want to include, any projects that you've done. If you know, within open source, if you want to share it, that's the place to do it. We're at Park Plaza this year, so it should be a really good event. All right.
Cool. The last event is CD Summit and Jenkins Days, which is it's in the Seaport.
Yes.
No.
Where's it at? TJ.
I forgot the name of the buddies.
Okay, it's in Boston.
It's in Boston. It's in one of the hotels in Boston.
CD Summit and Jenkins Days. So the first day is workshops, the second day is presentations. It's not very expensive.
Dustin and I will be there at a booth, representing, say what's up. So now you guys know people, so you can come and not be afraid.
Yep. And we do have a Slack channel if you want to talk about things afterwards. I will put the URL up there. You can sign up yourself. You don't have to ask one of us. So the format tonight is we're going to have 2 presentations, and then we're going to do an open space. For those of you that haven't done open spaces before, I'll explain it before we do it.
All right, awesome. So we have 2 sponsors. Guys, put your hands together first for SimpliSafe for the venue. For those that don't know SimpliSafe, you guys are in their building. Check out their open jobs board over here on the whiteboard. There's a lot of representation here, so if you are an employee of SimpliSafe, please put your hand up so people can acknowledge. So definitely, if you guys are interested in what they're doing here, you know, grab one of these guys, talk about it. But we also want to introduce ThreatStack. ThreatStack is hosting our social event for after this meetup. We're going to be heading over to Scholars, which is right over here. And they're buying drinks for everybody for, you know, some social collaboration. Continue the discussion.
That was awesome.
Yeah, to continue the discussion from here to over there. But I want to introduce you guys to Sam and Tom. They can tell you a little bit about ThreatStack, who they are, and what they're doing. All right?
Hey guys, I'm Sam. I'm the internal recruiter over at ThreatStack. Sorry, didn't realize there was a camera involved. I'm Sam. I'm the internal recruiter over at ThreatStack. We are hiring on our platform development team. We make a cloud security platform. Our team is small but growing. It's a lot of fun. We're also hiring for like UX management positions and some DevOps later this year. And speaking of which, Tom is our DevOps lead.
Yes, I'm one of our infrastructure engineers.
It's a great time to actually get into security right now. Like, we've been talking for the past couple of years about DevOps and, you know, the interaction between development and operations, and, you know, new collaboration, new tools. Well, these sort of things are now starting to bleed over into security, and we're starting to bring security into the fold. So again, it's a very new space. There's room to create new ideas, create new tools, and that's part of what we do.
So if you want to take part in the fun over at Scholars, it starts at 9, and just see me and I'll get you a wristband.
All right, awesome. Thank you, guys. I'd like to bring up Doug Gaff. Doug is the VP here of engineering at SimpliSafe. He has a little bit of introduction about what SimpliSafe does, some of the challenges they have here, and then obviously any kind of questions you guys want to provide, you can ask either to Doug or the group of employees that we have here. Right, Doug?
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I wanted to tell you a little bit about SimpliSafe. We've been kind of flying under the radar a little bit in Boston, but we've been growing like crazy the past couple of years, and now it's kind of had to have our coming out a little bit. So first off, we're mostly on the 9th floor right now, so this is new space we're building out and moving into. We have engineering, marketing, and a call center on the 9th floor. We're about 300 people now. Yeah, hard to believe that a good chunk of that is our call center. We have all of our call center locally, so when you call up for tech support or sales, you're talking to somebody in the office in Boston, and when they get stuck with somebody, they come and talk to engineering. So we're all about customer support. Engineering team's about 30 people. It's grown pretty dramatically in the past couple of years. Company's 10 years old. It was bootstrapped by Chad Lawrence. Where's Chad? Okay, there's the founder. His face is on everything, so get a good look. Chad started the company in the kitchen and really built it up to what it is today. The company has been growing massively, double-digit growth for several years now. We've really been kind of an IoT company before it was a word, before it was a thing. We've been internet connected from the beginning. The original base stations talked over the cellular, over the pager network, and now it's cellular. So when you get an alarm system that goes out from your house, it's going over cellular connection. Next generation base station is going to be Wi-Fi connected, including cellular. All the sensors in your house are wireless, so where you figure out what you want for your own home, you order it, it's delivered, pre-configured, and you stick it up on your walls. And just like the guy who sold the razors, I was a customer before I came to work for the company, so for about 2.5 years. So it's a great place to work. We are hiring. There's a whole bunch of jobs posted there. But if what you do is not on the board, or you know somebody who's really looking for a cool company that still behaves like a startup, even though it's gotten pretty sizable, definitely have them come talk to us. We'd love to meet new and interesting people. Quick shout out to the DevOps and QA team. So Kevin, somewhere back there, Barton, Ed's DJ for tonight. There's Ed.
DJ Busybox.
DJ Busybox, sorry. Andy Wang, who I don't know if he's here, but he's a brand new hire. Zane Whitney, Steve Gardos, who doesn't even start until Friday, is back there. So these guys have really helped put this thing together, along with our Scrum Master, Anna, who's not here tonight. So give them a big round of applause. Okay, so I am very much not the main attraction, so I just want to give you a quick rundown on what it looks like in terms of infrastructure here. So we're entirely cloud-based and always have been cloud-based. Even the call center is run entirely out of Asterisk servers in the cloud. So very much a lot of stuff we've built ourselves. A lot of stuff's based on open source. We're launching video cameras fairly soon. They're up here on the front desk if you want to check them out. That's a whole new massive set of infrastructure for us. We like to joke about our infrastructure and say we started out in monolithic, and we're sort of in microservices right now, so we're trying to get into the smaller services, but we're really not quite there yet. And we're looking for sort of infrastructure version 3, which is true microservices deployment. So that's why we're hiring so much, and why we're trying to build something interesting. So I think that's probably it.
All right, we're having our second talk. You want to make your way over? Sit down. Next up, we're going to have Howard Perlstein. He's a strategic program manager, business partner, and management consultant, focused on helping companies through change, organizational design, management, etc. Howard will be talking about why organizations become complex. Welcome, Howard.
For next year.
Just last night, I did a rehearsal of my talk at Boston Python. Which one? No, the rehearsals were okay.
Hello. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. So just a little bit more about me, just to sort of set the stage for why we're talking about what we're talking about. I spent 6 years at PwC doing all their organizational consulting and working with all their clients to help them implement organizational change. I've been on my own for 15 years where I exclusively work with fast-growing organizations to help them implement change and to grow, to scale inside from a people, organization, process perspective. And I also work with this program that's co-sponsored between Goldman Sachs and Babson College, where I work with CEOs of small growing businesses to help them grow their businesses. So why this happened was I sort of got into the whole organization thing by accident, because I spent 15 years before doing any of that basically being a victim of poor organizational management and poor org changes. And I used to watch people get fired, watch people get summarily marginalized. I used to watch people's work get devalued. And I always thought, geez, there has to be a better way. And I was always in the finance function, so I never could really understand the full aspect of management. So I went to PwC. I learned a lot about how to do it. Now on my own, I really learned how to do it because I started working with all the leaders of all the organizations. So what we're going to talk about tonight is why is it so hard, basically, to understand and navigate organizations, and why is it so complicated, particularly when we're building organizations, when we're growing and changing. And what my perspective is this is everything that I have learned, that I have seen, that I have personally done. And this encompasses companies and organizations from helping a startup literally in their kitchen go from 1 person to 10 people in about 3 weeks, to I worked on a job at Pratt & Whitney where we reorganized 20,000 people across 8 time zones in 3 months and got them all up and running on this new ERP technology. That was new at the time. That's sort of an old thing, but it's sort of that brain. So what we're going to talk about is everything I've really seen. It's a real experience. And hopefully it's applicable to everybody here on some level. So this is what we're talking about, right? Can everybody see this? Everyone make sure you can see, because I have some pretty snazzy animations. This is an organization, right? It's any organization. This is typically how we represent it on paper. It's an organization, department, group, team, dyad, triad, frat. However you want to think about it, you can actually represent an organization drawing like this. You add in a little culture, and boom, you're all done. This is it. It's not that hard. I don't know why everybody gets all worked up about this. I debated whether to put leadership on here, but I thought, every time I assess culture, I really assess leadership. Every time I talk to somebody about the boxes, and I'll be talking about boxes a lot, I talk about the leadership at the very top. And of course, you can't really put leadership on there because I know there's supposed to be a red dot here somewhere. Here we go. Any one of these boxes either is a leader, could be a leader, or thinks they're a leader. So that's it. That's it. So I'm done with my presentation. Any questions?
Short and crisp.
Short and crisp, that's exactly right. But organizations are alive. They're like anything else, like any other kind of relationship you've ever been in your life. They're alive, they're in situations change, therefore organizations have to change. And they typically have to change without having any ability to say, no, we don't want to change. Matt just got up here for the last probably 10 minutes of his presentation. I was just thinking, yep, that's org change, that's org change, that's org change, that's going to be a revolution, that's going to, you can see it all. So start looking at this. Here's your organization. We get all these pressures that can come down at any one point in time. If different policies and regulations changed, forces some kind of pressure on the organization. New leadership, rapid growth, new technology, new tools. All these things are going to make the organization rethink what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it. Changing customer demands. competition, inefficient processes, different team members. This is just a small sampling. This is everything I've seen that I know for a fact will mess up an organization if the organization stays the way it is. You can see it's kind of subtle but not too subtle if you really are paying attention to any of this. There's a mixture here of internal and external drivers that are forcing the organization to rethink the way it needs to do its work. There's something missing. What do you think? Everybody in this room should be screaming out what's missing about that could change an organization that I didn't put up there.
Microservices?
So if I had understood what microservices was before this, I would have put it in there.
Sequoia investing?
Excuse me. You've got new leadership up there, but you haven't got insane leadership. Which is what I've encountered in a number of positions.
I have 10 slides. Wait, just give me a minute.
What about security?
What about what?
Security.
Security, typically, I've seen it under new technology and new processes, but it could be there. So what am I thinking of? Right? I mean, from everything I've read, everything I've seen, everybody I've talked to. What?
That's not a thing.
That's right, it's not a thing. That's what makes it so bad. That will screw up everything if you don't do it the right way. It's potentially a very, very major change driver. Okay, so when organizations go through that, they have all that stuff starts to happen. If you don't address it, stuff starts to happen. Here's one example, silos, form. All levels, sometimes they're visible, sometimes they're invisible. Typically, management only acts on silos when it prevents them from selling their product or making more money. Or if they find out that people are quitting left and right, then they go, oh, we might want to do something about this. It's always the same. Over here, we have some attack from the outside of the organization, puts pressure on some department. That department does what it's supposed to do because they're all very qualified and they work very hard on their teams. They're done. They go catapulted over to the next department, and so forth and so on. It takes time, it takes money, it's very inefficient. Typically, you can screw up a lot of morale when you do that. It's pretty bad. Teams tend to really feel the brunt of this if you don't react or don't do anything different. I've seen a lot of team fighting. I've seen a lot of other kinds of team dysfunction. I was in a board meeting once. Luckily, only once this happened. It was in a board meeting, and they were making a move to implement to something called shared services, which was a mixture at the time of technology, but mostly finance stuff. And it was a bunch of different organizations. And they called all the controllers and all the area CFOs around the table to talk about what was going right or wrong. And one of those CFOs brings out in the middle of the meeting, just reaches down under the table and brings out a stack of papers that literally, no joke, is this deep, must have weighed 20 pounds, and just drops on the table, completely blank, but claimed it was a list of all the inefficiencies that the guy next to him had done. Talk about, I mean, it was the Wild West. Talk about public hanging. So you can see there's all kinds of problems that can come up. Does this resonate with anybody so far? On any level about anything? I mean, I hope not, but it does.
That's a no-blame post-mortem. What you just described. With a lot of blame.
We should talk about no blame post-mortems after this.
Blame Miles, dude. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Rapid growth is this other big thing that happens, right? I mean, you get buried. You can't hire. Typically, you find that you can't hire people fast enough. You don't know if you're hiring the right people. They get thrown into a role that maybe they're not the best person for that role. There's not a lot of training. There's not a lot of support. It's sink or swim. And the organization keeps going and going and going, and everybody thinks it's all great because you keep making more and more money, because you're selling more and more product. But meanwhile, somebody's under all that rubble, sticking their hand up going, what's going on? And you're lucky if it's only one person. So what do? We move around the boxes. It's classic, it works every time. Right? This one, this is overly simplified. I just wanted to make the point that basically we say, old state, geez, we're not working, we have all that dysfunction. Let's do this. We can make Sally have 2 reports, and Bill has only 1, and Jim doesn't work for anybody anymore as an individual contributor, and we're all set, right? Doesn't work. It's not that it won't work all the time, because there's no absolutes in any of this. For as many places, and I've been in a lot of them, for as many places as you can say that this won't work, there's always going to be one person that raises their hand and says, "Oh, we just did that and it worked great, we're up and running." And to that person I say, "Great, more power to you." 99.9% of the time, moving around the boxes, it's the easy way to do things, but more often than not, it's not enough.
Move the top.
What's that?
Take the top. Remove the top.
You cut off the top or just
Cut off
move
the top.
So it's a good point, and sometimes that's warranted, and a lot of times it isn't. But everything, when they do this, typically it's a bloodbath. Anything that was in that box, whether it's a person or a department or an organization or a business unit, is subject to just arbitrarily, that's not working anymore, we're moving over here. Either way, it's not gonna help. So what do we do? This is starting to get into why it's so hard, or why it's complicated. I wouldn't say it's hard, it's not really hard, but why is it so complicated to start to redesign an organization for growth? And again, I'm talking about an organization, I'm talking about a team, a department, a group. It applies all the way through. I've done it, I know that it works. Instead of boxes, there's 5 things to consider, right? Structure, of course, is the boxes. Structure is reporting, right? Who reports to who? What's the right span of control? What's the optimal way to have the right number of people report to the right supervisor? What's the right organization of supervisors? Does the box look sane and rational? Boom. But of course, we just proved that's not enough. You have to oops, sorry. Just gave away one of the secrets. You have to also think about job roles. Job roles are the most overlooked and overused aspect of redesigning an organization, because most people think it's a job description, but most people don't include the 3 critical elements in a job description that you need to include. One of them is accountabilities. Right? And accountabilities is always should be matched with responsibilities. So if you're doing something and holding somebody accountable for it, you also have to make sure that it's noted somewhere in that description what the relationship is to the rest of the department, so you know who's doing what they're responsible for. So it's always accountability, responsibility. Second aspect of a job role is skills. What do they need to specifically be able to perform the task or the job at hand that you're asking them to perform? And the third is what interaction do they have with the rest of the organization. You bake that in. You plan that in. It's part of the interview. It's part of the way you bring somebody on board. You're checking off at least those 3 criteria for jobs. Performance measures. It's not just a performance review. Performance measures, when you're talking about an organization, you're talking about the organization's budget. You're talking about any kind of dashboard that might be with that organization. You're talking about any kind of individual performance metric that may be geared to a specific kind of task or function. They all generally have to be rationalized. They all have to work together. If they don't work together, you end up going back to the previous slides. We have all that dysfunction. Work groups. If I have a team of developers in Israel and a team of developers in Boston, and I want to treat developers one way, developers is a work group. It's not a team, because there's probably a team in Israel of developers that has a separate, different set of motives and incentives or whatever. But if I'm thinking about, okay, I got these work groups in the organization, I have to treat them differently. I have to think about what I want them to do. I have to think about how I want to incent them. I have to think about how I want to organize them. Integration. This used to be called, back in the day when PwC first introduced it to me, I looked at it, I was like, what a bunch of BS that is. But it's really what they call like integrating mechanisms. So what is the technology, old, new, yet to be determined? What is the technology? What are the configurations of people that we use to bring ourselves together to make sure we're all communicating about the same thing at the same time? I've been in places that are very, very high tech, and it's completely all in the cloud, and somebody at their home office in Seattle is completely on board with someone in their home office in Singapore. I've also been in places where it's quite the opposite. And their idea of integration is literally thinking about what meetings do we have, and who needs to be at those meetings, and what's the agenda, and what needs to bring us together, right? So this is just the organization. This whole thing replaces move around the boxes, but it's not enough. It's still not enough, because you could still do all that and still be off in a wrong dimension somewhere. You have to match that. You have to align that stuff with this other stuff, right? Which everyone loves to talk about, but no one can define, usually. And it's different in every single place you go. And in fact, it could be different in every single person, almost, if you sit down and ask them, what do they think about culture? What do they think about leadership? What do they think about whatever? It could be different. The good news is, every single thing up here, those 5 bullets, the 5 things in the Pentagon, can be broken down and analyzed in a very quantitative way, where you can be very specific about where they're breaking down, why they're not working together, and you can do something about it. So if you start thinking about your organization, if you have an organizational challenge of any kind, or somehow you're experiencing some kind of dysfunction, this essentially is the groundwork that you start looking at to assess where are my problems and really what do I need to do. All these things, Pentagon stuff, is all related to itself. The bigger picture is all related to everything. I mean, it's all, the right side and the left side are all related. The other thing that sort of happens when you start thinking about this is all this stuff happens at different times. Everything's on its own pace. You can only bring people on at a certain time. Meanwhile, the operational process has to keep working. The business model says we have to organize this way because we have to make this much money off of this department, and therefore they're going to be above the line. Okay, but maybe it will take you far longer to put that department together or think about it than you need. So you really have to think about what it is over here, what do you want to do, and there's a whole big, when you start undertaking this, it's not a really big process, but there's a process where you look at a whole strategy for implementing an organization for growth, and you always start from where you are. So the message, without danger of beating a dead horse anymore, is that all must be aligned to put you in the best possible position for the longest period of time. I didn't say it's going to work every time. What you can hope for is that. And if you get that, you're in the top half of 1% of all organizations that have been built and that are functioning. Because you're dealing with people, look around, everyone here, you can't be programmed. Your behavior can't be predicted. Things just happen. Right? So this is sort of give you like a very high level sort of beginning of why this is so complicated. And you have to balance it all. But I've gone this far, and I have yet to specifically mention the most important thing. It's not DevOps. And it's not Microservices. Does anybody want to guess what's the most important thing that I haven't specifically called out?
Communication.
Communication, you're warm.
Vision.
Who needs vision? Can be up there in mission objectives. If someone was warm with communication, I feel like we should have a prize. Who needs communication?
People.
Right. Hey, what do you know? People. Let me just do this. Okay. All that first part is laying the foundation. You got to think about that structurally. Now you got to incorporate the people who are, by the way, sitting there throughout this whole thing and watching it and observing it, and hopefully, if you're lucky, participating in it in some constructive way. Communications and audience, where that overlaps, that's where the change happens. Talking about usually some kind of a transition, some kind of expectation setting that has to happen, some kind of behavior that was happening before that now is not going to happen. It has to be substituted with some new kind of behavior. You have to understand the audience. You have to understand the power bases within the audience, the decision makers, the political problems, up, down, and sideways, the political pluses, up, down, and sideways. To communicate the right way at the right time. And that's only 2/3 of it. The last third is you've got to somehow make sure that when you're bringing people on and you're working through this change and you're adapting to new organizations, that you have to mentor them, train them, that there's onboarding. If you don't do that, even if you think you don't have time, which everybody always says we don't have time, you don't have time not to. The cost of not doing this, and I will attest to this from personal eyewitness, the cost of not doing anything that we've talked about is far, far greater than the perceived delay, which isn't even a perceived delay, in actually doing it. Those are the components. Organizations are a living thing. The situations that they're in are living things. There's always a transition. Transitions happen before they start in this world. They happen before they start. They happen when they happen. And then they happen after they're done. Family of 4, it's 2 little kids, 2 working parents. The kids are in 1st and 2nd grade. Weather report comes and says, having a massive snowstorm on Tuesday. Right? It's Sunday when we hear this. Every one of those people is going to think and behave differently in anticipation of that snowstorm. Everyone's going to behave differently, and everyone needs different messages, right? The kids are going to be all excited they don't have school. The father's going to be worried potentially, and the mother's going to be worried, how am I going to get to work? How am I going to take care of the kids? Daycare is going to be closed. We have to stock up on groceries. We have to do all this stuff. Then the snowstorm hits, and they're all housebound. It's a completely different dynamic, right? How are we going to get the videos? How are we going to keep the kids from screaming and driving us crazy? How are we going to stop each other from beating each other up? How are we going to do all this stuff? Then snow melts, the plows come, and everyone goes back to normal. We have to assuage the kids. Oh, it's time to go back to school. I don't want to go back to school. Well, it's time. Snowstorm's over. You have to get reacclimated back into work. This transition to a growing organization, to a new organization, even if you're already growing, already is happening, already should be managed. So when you start thinking about things like DevOps or microservices or anything else, the fact that you're talking about it right now, you're already behind in the communication about it. And you just keep it going until you're sure that the organization's churning along. Is this clear so far? I mean, it's not, I'm not up here rocket science, I understand that, but it's subtle. I mean, all of this, the real key to this is the invisible key, which is, it's all very, very integrated. All right. So why, this is sort of my, my Jerry Springer, what I learned kind of thing. So why is this so complicated? And then, again, your list could differ, right? I'm on the left-hand side over here. Organization has 5 elements, not 1. I'm thinking of the Pentagon, right? There's elements external to the structure that must be considered, and that was on the right-hand side, like culture, leadership, strategies, goals, and objectives, anything else you could think of that I didn't put up there is sort of along there. More often than not, you're changing a tire on a moving car. You can't stop. There are different organization theories out there. I run into them where they say, well, you got to freeze and unfreeze the organization. You can do stuff over the weekends and stop work. I've never seen it work. I think it's more academia than anything else. And if there's anybody in here that wrote that theory, I'm sorry. I just never really seen it work. And that changing colors, that's pretty slick. No one told me about that transition. It's a combination of soft skills, analytics, and discipline. So once you start and once you think about this as an objective, you gotta focus on it. And you gotta be able to work on the hard stuff and the soft stuff at the same time and make allotment and make accommodation to the room you need for that. And this bottom one is pretty interesting, and it's probably the hardest thing, is balancing discretion with transparency. Because at some point, it's gonna lead over to my lessons learned, but at some point somebody's not going to be happy. And at some point it's going to be more helpful for that person and for the organization for them not to be involved from the get-go in every aspect of the decision that's going to affect them. So you have to be candid, you have to be, but you also have to be discreet. It'll match, you have to figure out, it'll match your culture however you want to do it. Some places find this great, some places find it very, very difficult to deal with. We can talk more about it after in a second if you want. So your list, this is my lessons learned on the right side. Your list will differ. You could probably all list something that you learned in your organization that's different than what I've experienced. First thing is, always start with a good diagnosis. So what do I mean by that? It means I'm in an organization, or an organization comes up to me and presents with a problem. I want to be really sure that if they're asking me or us together, we're together going to solve an organization problem, that it is an organization problem. I can't tell you how many times people have gotten into trouble trying to solve a process problem by reorganizing. Or how many times people have tried to solve a technology problem because of a management problem, or vice versa. You've got to really look at the nuts and bolts and say, what is that you're really solving? A hint is, it's very, very rarely, unless somebody comes in from the outside and says we're going to take 30% of cost out immediately, it's very, very rarely an organization problem first. My experience is always mostly a process problem or a strategy problem, or strategy understanding problem. Second lesson, no such thing as one size fits all. That's why, by necessity, this is, well, there's a couple of reasons this is not very specific. One is I only have like 15 or 20 minutes, and we don't know who we are and the level of detail of organizations. But literally, you could look at that pentagon, and for as many organizations that are represented in here, come up with a different configuration of what it means. And you could also then take that pentagon and take anything that comes from it, and for as many organizations that are in here, lay out a distinct path of what has to happen to get from point A to point B. So it's never, never cookie cutter. Even if I had twin organizations, at one point it's hardly twin, but on the surface it sounds like it's twin. At one point I worked on merging Pricewaterhouse Consulting, no, all of Pricewaterhouse with all of Coopers and Lybrand. Both on paper, we have the same business units, we have the same structures, we have the same shared services, we have the same whatever. Absolutely impossible to assume, even from person to person, that anything was going to be dramatically different. What is the same is this overview I just gave you in this framework. That is the same. That's why we're talking about it. It doesn't change from situation to situation.
Hey, Howard, most of us were not born yet when you did that.
That's too bad. That's too bad for me. You got to follow a process. What was that?
It's been PwC for a while.
It's been PwC for a while, but I figured people have heard PW and Cooper, so it was a shot. I took a shot. You got to follow a process, right? Just like software development, it's not the same process, but it's the same methodology: analysis, design, build, test, implement. Believe it or not, that's what you do to change an organization. If you have a lot of, what I usually add to the front of it is build the case. So create a case for change, why you're doing it, analysis, design, build, test, implement. It's not easy. Again, it's just my thing. Not easy. It takes courage. There's not too many people that comfortably can walk into the board, chair of the board, or the CEO, or whatever, and tell them that they're doing something wrong. Or tell them that they're the employee that they have been working side by side with for the last 30 years needs to have some kind of adjustment. There's always winners, there's always losers. The lesson in there is that it's always costs more to not do something than to do the right thing. And if you don't do it, then everybody becomes a loser. Not everyone's a loser, but everyone loses. Upfront, candid, but not transparent. That's what I talked about earlier. So that, in 10 slides or less, I'm hoping I should give you some idea of why it's so hard, or why it's so complicated to grow and change an organization, what needs to be considered, and what you need to think about. What did you guys take away from this? And then what questions do you have?
I have one question.
right here first.
All right, I'll take it. How do you know your diagnosis is even close to on point? As a starting point, I mean, bad data in, then everything goes sideways. But from your experience,
it's the same. It's a great question. It's actually a very important question because if you can't get that, you can't go forward. Everybody agrees. Everybody that needs to agrees. So you go out, you run all these focus. I mean, it depends what the organization is, but let's just pick a menu of things. I have a series of focus groups. I run some surveys. I do some interviews. I go in and I look at all the organizational artifacts. I look at and read all the different email exchanges. I look for patterns. I look for trends. I do kinds of cultural assessments with people, and I get consistent answers. If I interview 200 people and 180 of them tell me that the hierarchy of the organization is inefficient and ineffective, I mask the answers. We come up with a summary report, and it's not just me. Like, nobody's going to hire me to come in and just say, oh, tell me what's wrong with my organization and fix it. If I'm doing this with somebody. That's sort of why I think I can talk about this with some degree of authority. It's because I actually work with the people that are running the organizations, and together we change it. So we have these results, we're putting things together. Their team, and whatever teams we deem are needed, are the ones that look at those results and get a buy-in about, listen, this is an inescapable fact. It's anonymized. I've yet to even have the threat of anybody coming back because they found out somebody said something they weren't supposed to say. There's a question over here.
So, in the day of DevOps and microservices, whose responsibility is it to manage the change?
Somebody that's actually done DevOps or done microservices in the room want to comment on that? Is there anybody in the room that's actually done DevOps or microservices?
I can take a shot.
Go ahead.
It depends if the change is related to people or is it the change to the system and the process. If it's a system and a process, I think the team can make a decision on what would be the best way to evolve.
Yeah,
like if it's continuous integration, if it's continuous delivery process, you have to break it down into manageable, I would say, reorganization for this to.
Yeah, I think the quick takeaway for me from your presentation, Howard, is that yes, change happens all the time, right? Change is one thing that's about not changing is about change.
Right.
Change happens all the time, whether it's disruption, market conditions, regulations, whatever. Change is always happening.
Right. And
your job is to go and diagnose it and allow organizations to cope with the change so that they can come out better. But in terms of managing that change, where I guess in our old days, command and control, it was the top leadership that was responsibility, and everybody sort of followed whatever they told the leadership said. But when you actually have this type of setting today, teams all over the place, smaller teams, they do their economy. So how do you manage to make sure that the changes are managed? Whose responsibility?
All right, Dave has something that I want.
No, TJ, it's a phenomenal point because it drives us into the reason why we brought Howard in to talk, right? The whole idea of change is a paradigm shift within traditional management. He's bringing up the point of top-down management, right? Like, if the top isn't willing to, identify where the change is and hire somebody like Howard to come in and say, hey, we need to do this, then nothing happens. For Howard, his point is it's all about the change agents as individual contributors and having the environment to be able to speak up. In a cultural environment where all of a sudden people are looking from the practitioners down and they're saying, yes, change is coming from the bottom up. The big paradigm shift in what we're seeing right now with these high velocity shops, such as SimpliSafe, such as everybody that Matt talked about, is being individual change agents, right? And are you guys given the development and the kind of skills to understand what needs to change and how that change happens. One of the things we want to talk about, like Dustin and I talk about this all the time as engineers, DevOps to us is a practice where you're actually thinking outside of just analytics, black and white. You're thinking about how your actual decision making is going to really affect the organization, how you're able to influence, what skills you need to be able to influence up. Everyone here has a specific point and a preference from how they see that perspective, right? The skills that need to be learned are how can you communicate that well enough that you are actually influencing people to then identify like change needs to happen overall. These are kind of the things that we want you guys thinking and like starting to enact on, right? Stop thinking like, hey, look, I'm here to rock the keyboard, you know, like specifically this is my responsibility, that's it. No, it's what do I do that can effectively change an organization, and whether I want to stand for that or not, right? Because the whole thing is this: in today's market, if you're not in the right environment where they understand that you have a value to add, not for your actual individual contribution, but for the organization overall, what type of mindset do you have? Are you in the right place? And a lot of people, including TJ's panel, said, talk with your feet. Because if you believe that you are that change agent, but your organization isn't listening to you, other organizations out there will want your skill sets and accept and adopt the skills that you have. So the whole idea to answer your question is, I want each of you to look into your heart of hearts and understand that you have the ability to make change in your organization. If you don't and you believe you do, question whether you're with the right organization. Period. This is where this industry is going. Bottom line, from what Matt discussed to what TJ and consulting to what Howard brings to the table. It's all about a belief and a vision of who you are and how you see yourself.
So you invariably end up hitting the old Conway's Law adage, right? Where in systems design principles, you are destined to design computer science. You're destined to design systems that actually mirror the hierarchy, the organizational hierarchy of the system. DevOps actually bucks that trend. So if you're a change agent, you will stand out, but it needs to be done exactly in reverse. Don't be just a prisoner to Conway's Law. You have to go the other way around.
So,
and I actually asked, I came in halfway through, I did ask, did we talk about Conway's Law at all? And no, it wasn't mentioned. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
okay.
So read up on that, read up on that literature, and look about the recipe going the other way.
Right. So, how much time do we have?
5 minutes.
This is the last question. So I'm going to answer it obliquely. I'm going to answer it obliquely. So I think all 4 comments that were in response to how do you manage that change are actually on the money, which makes it that much more complicated. Underlying everything, the common theme is, what's a change agent? What should I be doing as a change agent? What realistically is a change agent role in an organization? Because there's such a thing as a lot of shit happens and I don't like it and it's not efficient, but that's just the way it is and I can't do anything about it. And then there's stuff that happens and I don't like it and maybe I can do something about it. And then there's another layer of, boy, they're changing all this stuff. I have to go along with it. I may not agree with it, but I have to go along with it. Each one of those situations means you have to have a different role in what is going on, right? So the best thing to do, like the biggest defensive, offensive thing to do, is to very, very thoroughly understand your role in the organization and understand the political dynamics that surround you. And then, to the extent that you're able, and the extent you feel comfortable with it, and the extent you feel like you can take a political risk, and you want to do something about it, try to do something about it. Data speaks louder than words. Facts speak louder than, like financial facts speak louder than almost anything. So if I was going to start a DevOps organization tomorrow, if someone said, come in and we really want to start a DevOps organization, I'd start at the top of the organization and find out immediately if there's buy-in, if there's even understanding, and if there's even a shot at positioning DevOps as a strategic initiative. Because if you don't do that, I think you get a really tough road to climb, and doesn't mean you won't get there. It doesn't mean the organization won't wise up. It'll just be pretty tough.
It's not incremental. It cannot be.
It depends on the organization.
Maybe.
No, definitely. But it's not going to be like, you're not going to walk in one day and flip the switch and be DevOps.
I meant something different. You cannot effectively implement DevOps as an organizational change if you don't have exec buy-in. You can optimize processes incrementally once you have the decision, and you should, because you're not leaving your business while you're transforming. But if you don't have the buy-in, you cannot reorganize the company.
Right.
It isn't just the buy-in, it's getting upper management to actually put their fingerprints on it.
No, absolutely. They have to feel it's theirs.
Right.
I agree.
Right. Well, it is their organization, whether we like it or not. It's your organization too, but it's theirs. So I just brainstormed. I knew you guys are having open spaces after this, so I thought these might be 3 kind of starter questions if you wanted to continue this, if you thought it was useful for you to think about these questions. Can you use these ideas to facilitate a DevOps transition? Why or why not? Can you apply these ideas to organization? Why or why not? And can these ideas help you influence change? Why or why not? And we sort of just bled into that a little bit, but it sounds like it's a pretty healthy discussion to have amongst people here in a relatively safe environment. Get the answers documented and see, maybe we can post them on the DevOps Meetup site or something and get some benefit from it. Everybody can start sharing and learning. So thank you very much for your time and your patience and your listening to me. I hope it was somewhat helpful, somewhat informative. And I'm going to, I guess, hand it back to Dustin and Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Who here has never done an open space before? It's okay. All right. Open spaces are a discussion group. So what we're going to do is we are writing topics you want to talk about on the board here. There's a few already written. So if you have an idea, if you have a problem that you're working on and you want to share it, discuss it with other people, just write it down. We'll vote on it in 5 minutes, and then we'll break out and start talking.